Net margin was at our best 5.5%, and that's 2019 numbers. When net margin has dropped to, I'll be honest, almost zero at this point, and that's because our expectations for this year is to basically get through it. And then we will slowly grow that back up.
I didn't expect to hear that.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Our volume has continued to decline, and that's not unique. I think that's generally the market trend right now.
What's up, everyone? This is Car Dealership Guy. You're listening to the Car Dealership Guy podcast, which is my effort to give you access to the most unbiased and transparent insights into the car market. Let's get into today's episode. Joel Bassam is the president at Easterns Automotive Group, an 8-store used car dealer group based out of the DC, Maryland, and Virginia region. This episode was an absolute masterclass in the literal sense. Joel was very transparent. We spoke about how to exploit seasonality in the used car business, how much money he makes on every single car, how he's been leveraging the Domino's model for selling cars, his shocking revelation about his profits, the unconventional case for buying older cars, and a little surprise I added throughout the time I bought 100 cars with a credit card. Pretty crazy story. I think you'll love it. But before we get into the show, this episode is brought to you by Fullpath. Wasted data is a serious issue in automotive, but data is the key to driving revenues, which means some dealers out there are just ignoring a gold mine that is staring them in the face. Let's face it, most dealerships are completely overrun with data silos. None of the data sources are integrated with each other, leaving the data as a jumbled mess instead of a clean set that could be turning into cash. Fullpath solves this by gathering, cleaning, and sorting your data into one platform so you can use it to speak to your customers' needs with killer AI-powered marketing campaigns. My friends over at Fullpath are breaking barriers, and I'm really excited to have them as a partner of the podcast. I believe in their product and, more importantly, in their mission to help dealers grow. Fullpath can help you turn your data into dollars. Find them at fullpath.com. All right, let's get into it. Here's my conversation with Joel Bassam.
All views of Car Dealership Guy and guests on this podcast are solely their opinions. None of the views expressed should be treated as financial advice. This podcast is for informational purposes only.
All right, we got Joel Bassam on the pod. Joel, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
I'm doing well. Joel, you guys, Easterns, you're considered legends in the used car business, and I don't say that lightly. You've been around for a very long time. And you've done some very creative marketing, which I, as a marketer, I really appreciate. We'll get into that shortly. Let's just zoom out for a second. Yeah. And I'm very excited about it. And we'll also play the jingle.
Love it. Tell us. I apologize for your audience because it's going to be stuck on their head, I think.
No, the jingle is great. I absolutely love it. All right. So, Joel, tell us how did Easterns get started? How did you get to where you're at today? Give us the background.
Sure. Yeah. So Easterns, we're celebrating our 35th year this year. So we were officially established in 1988. Short-ish version of the story was my father was, a waiter who got transferred after he came to the United States when he was 10. He was working in an Italian restaurant, got transferred to DC. And he went with his father to the Salvation Army, found that they were selling cars that ran for like $50. So he bought that car, sold it to his coworker for $300, and was like, the light went off and, thought this is way better than tip money. So went back, bought a couple more cars, sold those to other coworkers, pooled his tip money with another coworker, bought a bunch more cars, then kept getting tickets because he's driving them without, tags or anything like that. And he was trying to park them at the restaurant. Long story short, he added, one of his regulars was a dealer. And so he told them where to go to this place in Virginia. You can get a dealer license. So within 3 weeks from selling his first car, he became a dealer. And was working in the wholesale side of things for a long time. Ended up transferring one of his wholesale lots into a commercial lot. And, that's where he really realized what is still a core identity of Easterns today, which is subprime market. And the people who are in that credit position are generally not treated well across the automotive business. And so he started a company that was really intended to treat subprime customers like they were prime. We had higher quality cars. They were treated with respect and dignity, and we treated them with the same expectation of customer service that you would any other customer off the street. We launched with where your job's your credit. And then, that was a slow burn for a long time. Good operator, single point. And then, the jingle that you had mentioned before really sent us into the stratosphere, and we expanded into 17 locations, believe it or not, at one point. We've actually consolidated down to 8 points, and we currently park and sell more cars than we did with 17 locations.
All right. So a lot of questions here. So first of all, people hearing $300 for a car are probably thinking that's absolutely crazy.
Oh yeah.
And, doc fees are more than $300 nowadays.
Oh yeah. Yeah, for sure.
Second thing is, how many years did you have just a single point dealership before expanding to a second, third, and fourth? How many years was that?
1988, we opened our second location in 2001. So
Got it.
long time,
Yeah.
single point. Yeah.
Okay. Now, explain to me, what's the basic business model here for people that don't know? Clearly, I know very well, but I want the audience to understand, like, what is your
Sure.
business model at Easterns?
Yeah. So our current business model is built off of the concept of, at its core, you know, my father, our founder and our CEO, who's incredibly active in the business, we buy a car when we sell a car. So everything's built around the concept of opportunity buying at the first step of our entire process. And then after that, it's all about efficiency throughout the entire process of getting a car from auction or off the street to a retail ready car for a consumer, and how to ease every single one of those handoff points to save money and do it faster, and then do it at volume.
And
So we
what
do
do you
that
mean
in a
by we buy a car, we sell a car? Like, do you mean that literally, or are you trying to imply something different? I'm not following that.
I mean, literally in the sense that when we buy a car at auction, that's the point at which you decide, I mean, I guess in a somewhat figurative way, that that car is going to sell well. If you buy it wrong, you're
The
never going to sell
profit,
that car well.
yes, the profit is in the
Yeah,
purchase. Okay, just wanted to
yeah,
make sure.
100%. Yeah.
And I do agree with that for the subprime business, especially. The profit
Oh
is
yeah.
absolutely in the purchase.
Right. And so that being our core, and that's what starts everything. So, our business at this point is built as a hub and spoke model, which means, I'm currently in our corporate center in Sterling, Virginia. This is one part of a massive, I feel comfortable calling it a campus at this point. It's about 200,000 square feet of warehouse and 20 acres. And it houses
Wow.
roughly about 100 employees. And this facility has all of the brains and back of house operations that you'd find at a traditional dealership. And for your listeners who don't know, at a franchise dealership, that's really, even if it's part of a larger group or organization, that's its own, entity and established business, meaning it, probably has its own bookkeepers, it has its own, potentially its own HR department.
The service department, are you referring to?
No, I mean everything too. I mean service as well, yes, but additionally, you think of tag and title departments that handles all the paperwork.
Oh, yes. Every single dealership has its own
Right.
team. Yes.
Right. It has its own business operations, right? So Easterns doesn't have that. So my retail locations, we call them delivery centers. And that's designed because they only have sales staff. They have what we call customer advisors and product specialists, which is really just marketing for a salesperson. And then we have sales management staff and lot management staff, which means our economy of scale changes dramatically as we add more spokes to our hub, right? Our fixed and variable costs at the center point, which is producing everything for all of our stores, stays relatively static as we add more retail locations. So, everything is supported from this corporate hub, this single point. So this facility can put out 50 retail ready cars a day. And those then get distributed to all of my retail locations, which, for me, it doesn't actually really matter where they go because we operate a single website, single inventory, and it's a single shopping experience for my consumers. So they'll get sent out. By the way, we own the trucks. That's part of our campus
Oh,
logistics
wow.
company. And all those cars that when we buy them from auction come here because we have our own reconditioning center, which is all of the mechanical reconditioning and anything it needs to do to get the car retail ready. And for us, that means standards slightly higher than Maryland state inspection. So my locations are in Maryland and Virginia. And then on top of that, we have our own body shop. The only thing that a vehicle ever leaves this facility for is warranty work because, that's free and I can't do it here. So everything else is supported out there. So that's really the business model for scale. It's that because we can continue to add retail points without adding a second hub. And our fundamental belief is we can add, I'd say, at least 3 and potentially 5 more retail locations without having to add a second hub.
Hmm. Yeah. So basically, if someone would Google right now, the Carvana Reconditioning Center, right? This is the same concept. And, there's plenty of images of that online, but you're
Sure.
operating in a centralized manner, right? Which makes total
Yes.
sense. I think for people that don't know, franchise dealerships, like you mentioned, they typically operate a bit more decentralized. Doesn't mean
Yes.
everything's decentralized, but, so like they will have service on every single location. Now, the difference there, which I think is important to note as well, is that service typically for a franchise dealer is a very big business
Right.
And for used, it's typically a lot smaller or just non-existent. Do you guys do retail service, or do you only recondition your cars in-house?
So we don't do any customer service. We only recondition the house. And I'll take your point a step further. And one of the things that makes used car sales at a new point a little bit more difficult, at least internally, is what you just mentioned, which is service centers or profit centers for a dealership, right? And that generally includes internal conflicts. So the service manager and used car manager at a franchise point probably aren't friends, because that service manager is actually attempting to make money on their used car department, because they're kind of separate islands. They're different countries, right? So for us, like, one of the things about our kind of company culture and what makes Eastern special is, the trick question will always be, no matter what you do, what do? You sell cars, because that's our only source of income, right? So it doesn't matter if you, work in reception, you work in tag and title, you work as a reconditioning tech, you are a car salesperson when you work for Easterns, because that's all we do. And a little bit more color to our background of really how we ended up here is, part of my father's growth as a business person and as an individual was going through Domino's, believe it or not, which, I know Domino's gets talked a lot about, and I admire them a lot. Like, they're almost like a technology company at this point that happens to sell pizza. But they're incredibly committed to efficiency. So he had worked at a different Italian restaurant. And when he, came there, he's like, oh yeah, I can make, strombolis, I can make garlic bread, I can do all this stuff. And they're like, nope, we just make pizza, and we're going to do it in 30 minutes or less. And it's going to be incredibly consistent. So the difference was he worked at this other little Italian shop. Like, Domino's had thought of everything. They cut the cheese smaller so it wouldn't clump. They had a spinning mechanism that would catch extra cheese and extra sauce so you can reuse it on the next pizza. They had measuring cups for everything. So every pizza that came out was exactly the same. That, like, little bit of his life stuck with him to the point where we're literally like arguing about $5 on FedEx fees in order to charge less for a consumer. So we analyze every step of this process to make sure that we're able to sell cars at volume and maintain a healthy gross profit per unit, while actually being competitive in the market on pricing as well. And all that ends up benefiting all of our stakeholders throughout the process, because we buy more efficiently, we recondition more efficiently, we're able to get these cars to market quicker and faster. Our floor plan costs are lower. Our portfolios with our lenders perform better because of the actual metal we're putting out on the street is of a higher quality, especially when you compare it to a traditional used car dealership, which generally has access to lower quality collateral. All those things kind of add up to why we are in the position we are now, which is, I would say there are, generally the market's looked at as you're a franchise or you're not a franchise, right? And I think that's a dramatic oversimplification of a very complicated business. And I'd argue that we're more akin to like a third box, which is like a super independent or something it's just different than the standard independent dealership lot, because most of those are single points.
Do the current market headwinds scare you? I mean, you guys are, I think there's something to be said. You're very hyper focused on, one profit center, not very, well diversified in the sense of like, a franchise dealer that has service, parts, new car, used cars. How are you guys thinking about just the current, market conditions and the disproportionate impact it's having on used car dealers?
No, I mean, the short answer is no. I'm not worried at all. Actually, I think that in the used car space is the best place to be long-term in the car business, if you're looking at the negative headwinds that are coming towards franchise models more than the used space. And
why do you think that?
I think that the pressure on the franchise model is warranted in a lot of ways. And I think that the increased adoption of EVs and the pressure that the OEMs are putting on direct to consumer in that market space is going to create a lot of issues for franchises. In the sense that if I'm putting on my Ford hat, right? I'm probably not going to be extending, doing a lot of open points, which for your listeners means that they're adding another Ford market to an existing market, right? I don't think there's going to be a lot of new open points coming down the pipe. And I think if any of them, go under or get consolidated with large players, they're not going to get replaced ever. And I think that that's only going to increase the blue sky costs, which I know I'm using a lot of in industry terms.
Yeah, the blue sky cost just being the value paid on the goodwill. When you purchase a dealership, there's a multiple you pay on earnings, right? That's the price you pay for the dealership. So that's the industry term for blue sky.
Yeah. And so if you think of that concept and apply it to OEMs basically saying, hey, I'm not going to let you sell these cars anymore. So that entire market share is in it. So I think that the new market share is going to continue to either stay the same or maybe slightly increase from where it's currently at. But then the availability for dealerships to actually monetize that market share will continue to shrink. And I think none of those pressures apply to the used space, at least currently. And if there's, I think that CPO has been wildly mismanaged at the tier 2 level in a lot of ways, which
What do you
is
mean by that?
enable.
Explain this.
I don't think that there's a true understanding from a consumer education side of what the value of a certified pre-owned vehicle is versus, what I have, right? I don't have certified pre-owned vehicles, not legally speaking, but they're up to a specific standard that we'll stand behind. We back with value for a consumer with a 30-day warranty and, a 7-day return policy, all these things that I would argue probably have more value than the so-called, manufacturer warranty, which is really all you're getting with the CPO in a lot of ways. But then, they have, this maybe sounds a little crass, but the audacity to charge more for that car and say, oh, it's actually worth $1,000 more than what Easterns has because my tech has Toyota on a shirt, right? And that's really what it boils down to in a lot of ways. And I think that because they've done that, there's no specialness with buying a car from a new franchise that's used versus a large, reputable, independent group that has access to a lot of the same places and a lot of the same collateral.
I mean, you're making a lot of good points. And as a used car dealer, we've had a lot of these conversations. Look, certified pre-owned is a marketing mechanism. There's no doubt about it that different brands have different standards. Certain brands may hold their certified pre-owned to higher standards, but we always used to say, similarly to you, we are fully reconditioning our vehicles to, in many cases, to higher standards than our, local competitors, independent or franchise. And so I think highlighting that is super, super important. Look, needless to say, it shows up in the numbers, right? It shows up in your default ratios, your warranty claims and whatnot later on in the life cycle of that car. Right. But there's no doubt about it that it's absolutely in a used car dealer's interest to properly recondition a vehicle, because at the end of the day, you're going to, one way or another, if you did not recondition that vehicle properly, especially if you're targeting the subprime consumer segment, it's going to come back to you and it's going to come back hard. It might be the consumer that needs something repaired and they're pissed off and they tarnish your name. It could be higher default ratio with your lenders. So it just makes sense to play the long game as a dealer, period, because you end up benefiting in other ways economically.
100%. And it's crazy that we're having that specific conversation. Last night I was having dinner with my father. We were talking about this, and it was the same concept. We were talking about how we've always had in our market, one specific competitor that seems to be kind of coming after us in a lot of ways. Like instead of trying to create their own market share, they want to come after our market share, which is normal. It's healthy, good part of business. And, frankly, none of them are still around. And it's because of not having that long-term thinking. We will gladly take less money this year to create exactly what you're talking about, a better performing portfolio for my lenders, a better performing portfolio for my, pot of warranties, because I want my loss ratio sub 20%, which is what we average. And we get that incredibly low loss ratio because we recondition our cars well. And that
so
might
for every dollar of warranties that you're selling to customers, you're losing 20 cents, which is incredible. Right.
Yeah. And that's including the admin fee.
That's very, very, anyone that knows anything about the insurance industry, that's a very, very low ratio.
Yeah. And just to full transparency, that number has gone up recently because we've been putting, quote unquote, worse collateral into the pot because we've extended our buying parameters to buy older vehicles and higher mileage because of the inventory shortages. But that is a temporary,
100%,
thing right now. Yes. Right. And so let's say
that, which is another really good point that, like everyone is struggling to get cars and, you sort of quote unquote have to go deeper into the well because you just can't get, you can't get the stuff we used to get. So we have to kind of source in more creative ways, look elsewhere. So that's not surprising. And that's definitely something that I'm seeing across the board.
100%. Yeah. I mean, and honestly, there's some stuff that we've learned in there. Like if anything, we were almost too rigid with our guardrails before, because our average car we were selling before, and I guess I didn't get over this when we were talking about our business model, was a 2-year-old car with 35,000 miles or less, right? 2.5-year-old car. That was our average car sold. Sticker price was $22,500. give or take. Average credit score for a consumer was in the 680 range. We had a decent mix of prime and subprime because prime buyers were really more looking for the vehicle. Subprime buyers are more buying the brand, and they were looking for payment cars. And what's happened in this climate is that's shifted to older vehicles with more miles that actually cost more. So our average age of our vehicle has increased by a year. Our mileage has increased by 20,000 miles, but our average retail price has increased by $5,000, which is just not good for the consumer, frankly. And
What is your average retail price today for a car?
currently is 27.5. So it's gone up about $5,000.
27,000, and beforehand, so it was 22,500.
It was 22.
Wow.
Right.
And that's just a car. Does that include like warranties or anything?
No, that's just the car. Yeah. Warranty costs have actually been relatively stable, which is why, our loss ratios have gone up because, that is what it is. Like our pop performance was better because a lot of cars had some existing manufacturer coverage. All these things were like, by the way, all the stuff that I'm talking about now, this is like part of our buying strategy. Like we think about all of these things for the performance of the portfolio for the lender, the warranty salute, all that stuff that happens when we buy the car.
How are you sourcing your cars? Like, give me a pie chart of how you source your cars.
Yeah. So right now it's about 80% auctions and about 20% trade-ins and buying off the street. And if it was 2019, the last, somewhat normal period of time that we have to measure, it was 95% auction and 5% trades. We're holding on to more trades than we ever have been before because of the same, reason that we're buying deeper. And we've tried to dabble in buying off the street. We're not good at it, honestly. And I don't have the brand for it in this market. Like I spent 35 years talking about how good we are.
I love that you
selling
said
you
that.
a car.
I love that you just said that. No, I'll tell you why I love it. Because number one, it shows self-awareness. You're cognizant of the fact that when you buy a car from a consumer, you're a number. You're not offering there's some service and stuff involved and whatnot. But at the end of the day, you're a number. That's what you're competing against. And you're competing with everyone and their mother that's trying to buy off the street. Some of these companies are public, have way deeper pockets than you, and can probably even afford taking, lower margins on these cars than you. And so I think that's a very just astute statement to make that, that's not the sweet spot for you and really isn't the sweet spot for most used car dealers, frankly.
Yeah. I don't disagree. And I think everything you said is 100% accurate. The commoditization of that in this current climate has gone wildly out of control. Well, you're right. It's the customer says, they'll come into our doors and say, look, I've got an arm full of, these are the 5 offers I have. Either give me a higher number or I'm leaving. Right.
They give you an entire menu.
Yeah. They're like, I got this. And it's, they're not wrong 100%, but some of those numbers aren't accurate. Some of those haven't been inspected. And I'd actually argue that there are brands that exist that push past that. Like, I think there's a difference between, Bob's Discount offer offering you 25 and CarMax offering you 25, right? If I'm a consumer, that CarMax offer has an inherent value, even if it's $1,000 less. I'll take the national brand competition is a really difficult thing. There's an inherent consumer trust that's built with a national brand that you're never going to get from a single point or even a regional player in a lot of ways. So you're always going to have to combat that in just being a smaller player versus a national competitor.
How many cars do you guys retail per year?
So we were retailing about 12,000 cars a year. Now we're pacing closer to like 9,000.
Got it. And what is that in like revenue? What's your annual sales? Like 300
about
million?
250 million. Well, it's funny. It's the 250. So that's the funny thing is our actual revenue numbers have stayed about the same with that decrease in volume because of the increase per unit cost. But that does not mean we are making money. That's like if there was something that a drum I've been beating for the last couple of years at different conferences is there's this general perception of like, well, everyone's been killing it for 2 years. And that just isn't the case as an independent. We've been struggling with things that are very specific struggles that affect our side of the business different than the new side because our entry point hasn't stayed static like a new car. Like franchise models charging over sticker and increasing gross profit per unit is a sugar high that is going to be, basically negatively impact their year-over-year comps for probably the next 5 years. But I mean, they made money. That's great. Good for them. But in the used side, like we were buying in the craziness. Like, if I'm buying a car for 27 and I'm selling it for 30, it's the same as when I buy a car for 22 and sell for 25.
Yeah.
It's not really that different.
The gross profit percentage, the margin did stay, relatively flat. Maybe, some increases throughout. increase. It kind of oscillated back and forth, but yeah, it's definitely cars prices. Like every used car dealer had to pay more for those cars as well, so it
Right.
kind of
Which meant
went up
which
linearly.
meant the consumer paid more. And then, you couple that with increase in interest rates, and the loser in the scenario is really the consumer at the end of the day. I mean, and that's the part that is the hardest thing right now for us as operators. Is I don't feel like I'm doing the best for my consumer, and those are market conditions that will eventually fade. But my bread and butter consumer, my average consumer, they want a $400 payment or $300 payment, and that collateral just does not exist right now. It's just not something that is possible, because I can't buy a $12,000 or $13,000 car. And if I am buying a $12,000 car, it's got 180,000 miles.
Yeah. So what ends up happening is the customer just taking a higher payment because they have no choice.
Exactly. That's exactly what's happening. Or they're having to come up with higher down payments, and all that's negatively impacts everything I talked about before: portfolio performance, warranty performance, all that stuff.
Yeah.
It's not a great thing. I mean, these customers are in need. We're still gonna recon up to our standards, and we're gonna put them in a reliable vehicle. Don't get me wrong, but at the end of the day, those are conditions that I can't control. That's the weather. That's kind of what we always say, and we want that to continue to change, but that's just going to take time. This has to work its way through. I always refer to the wholesale retail relationships, franchise independence, like it's like an ecosystem, right? And we introduced like a plague or a blight at some point into the ecosystem, which would have been the lack of productions in 21 and 20 and 21. And now we're dealing with those consequences, and we have to just work them through the system. Every car that's produced today needs to get bought, sold, leased, returned to become a used car. And that just takes time. Like we're making wine. We're putting stuff in barrels and letting it age. So
how many cars do you carry in stock at all times?
Right now, it's actually super low. It's about 1,100 cars. And we'll have as many as 3,000 cars at a time. And we'll use seasonality to our advantage and our access to capital to maximize returns. So, new 2019
talk more about that. Yeah. What do you mean by that?
Yeah. So core identity, buy a car when you sell it kind of thing. Generally there's a seasonality in the wholesale market. So cars will increase in value during the, heaviest selling times, which is generally March to April, that tax season bump. And it'll kind of stay steady through the summer and then start dipping towards the winter when things slow down. Again, new side has a big bump during Christmas. On the used side, it's like the most, depressing months for any independent dealerships out there. And even from September to like February, you just want to get over with it and get the tax season. And so we'll use that to our advantage though. So because we have phenomenal relationships with our floor planning and we have a massive amount of space and a recon that can handle it, we'll buy, thousands of cars when no one's buying cars, because I'll be able to get into them at a lower entry price and then I'll just hold them. And the cost
you're not concerned that depreciation will outweigh that benefit given you're holding it for a couple of months?
This is in normal times, it doesn't, because there's always that bump in tax season that makes those cars better, right?
Yeah. In tax season, let's say like March, April, people are getting their tax refunds and they're coming to buy used cars. So of course you're stocking up December, January,
right?
You're getting heavy on the inventory,
right?
Tax season arrives, values rise a little bit. Oh, and by the way, the book value rises a little bit. And for those that don't know what book value is, and I'm speaking from experience, of course, but for those that know what book value is, it's when you go to get a car financed through a lender gives you financing, based on some number, and that number happens to be the book value in the subprime world. And so you're buying this, this car that is going to likely be trading for a higher price in a couple of months because there's more demand in the market, but also it's, perceived value or the book value that the lender is lending against will go up. And so net, it's a win because you have the capital, you can afford to buy it earlier, and then you have the car come tax season when prices are crazy.
Exactly. Yeah, you're 100%. So that's really one of the things like that. Our buying strategy, if I had to simplify it, is opportunity buy. So that's generally a seasonal opportunity that we take advantage of. And this is all things that if I'm a single point dealer, I'm going to probably try to do the same thing. But the difference is maybe have access to capital to buy 5 or 10 or 15 cars. We'll buy thousands of cars and hold them. And we'll just maximize that opportunity. So tax season's a seasonal bump. right? And that happens every year, but take the same kind of concept and apply it to the middle of the summer. So let's say there's a massive hailstorm somewhere in the country and all these cars get dumped into the market. A regular dealership's going to say, great. Oh my God, I just got a great deal on, these 10 cars. I mean, I'll go in, we'll buy no cars for a month and buy 500 cars in a day. It doesn't make a difference to us because of all the opportunities that we've been able to achieve with scale.
Can I tell you a cool secret about car buying? I
Great.
have a nice one. So I forget what year this was, maybe like 10 years ago, I don't know, something like that. But anyways, so we found this one government auction, right? Like it was GSA, they were selling government cars.
Yep.
And this is crazy. But first of all,
Clean titles?
they didn't clean titles, of course, all clean.
Oh,
It was like bread and butter cars, but ready for this.
Uh-huh.
This is crazy. So they, first of all, they didn't charge any fees. Like, let's just start there. There was no auction fees, which was wild to begin with.
yeah.
But here's what's even crazier. They let you pay with a credit card.
What? So you're
How
getting 3% cash
insane.
back?
Dude, you're getting, I forget how much, I think it was, I think we were using Capital One Spark at the time.
Yeah,
And that was
that's the way
paying
to
like
go. Yep.
2% or something.
Yep. Yep.
And I just remember being on the phone with the credit card company, like, hey, we need a bigger limit, this and that. But
Yeah.
putting every single car on the credit card and just flooding it with points.
Right.
So that
And you
was
could
absolutely,
probably do like some kind of cash flow with your floor plan too to pay like no fees for. That's amazing. Oh my gosh.
well, yeah. With these cars, we weren't even putting on floor plan at the time, but it was
Oh,
just
wow.
crazy because I just won't forget that. Just you can't find these things anymore. These things
No.
like they don't exist in the market anymore.
No.
You know.
No, if you're looking for a honey hole,
Tell
you're
your dad about that one. Your dad
I
will love
will.
that story.
Yeah, you're going to send him down a rabbit hole to go find it now. So that might be
I'll-
worse.
You,
You stay up all
I'm
night
telling
looking
you,
for
you know what it
GSAs.
is? Yeah, look, listen, don't hate the player, hate the game. Like if I can pay with a credit card, of course I'm going to add 2% to my margin, 2 points to my margin. But
Yeah.
but I think this is the ethos of the used car business. It's like a dollar saved is a dollar earned. That's the only way to make it in this business where your net margin is, 3 to 5% depending on the year.
100%. Yeah. I mean, and I think that I'd argue, and I've said this before, and I'll say it again, because of the nature of the independent space, one, I think it brings in and lures in more entrepreneurial spirit than almost any other industry, because it requires almost no experience, no education, and, very little capital to get started. And then the returns are immense if you do it well. And all you have to do it well is a hustler and someone who understands cash flow really well. And then you can really make a lot of money very quickly and grow very, very fast. And I'd also argue that it brings in a tremendous amount of diversity in a space that doesn't have a lot, that doesn't exist in the franchise model because of the gatekeeping that inherently exists there. That obviously those barriers have lessened over the years, but they existed for such a long period of time that there's an inherent systemic difference between the composition of the independent dealer body versus the composition of the franchise dealer body. Very different when you go to NADA versus an IADA. And that's
which are again for listeners, that's just the two industry conferences. One is targeting franchise dealers, one is targeting independent dealers. I think that the used car industry fundamentally it favors, that immigrant mentality. Because I think as an immigrant, you come to this country and, you have to sort of, kind of really figure it out, fight to live in a way. And that is the used car business. I think that mentality it does not serve well in many other industries. Like there's plenty of industries where you need to actually, allocate as much capital and go big. And this is an industry where you look for every day you come in, you say, where can I save a buck? Where can I look for more efficiencies? That's the only way to survive and thrive in this industry.
100%. And it's a tweet that you sent out just years ago. I may feel like a year ago, but I think you said like the franchise model is, at the end of the day, it's like a real estate play and a dealer owned warranty play, right? And I think you could argue that that's relatively true. I mean, for a lot of dealer principals, and not all, obviously I'm not painting with a broad brush, but, I don't think that they necessarily care if their dealerships are tremendously profitable in the sense that they want them to turn a profit, but they're not going to lose sleep the way an independent dealer will lose sleep if their profit margin drops by 0.25%. Let's say 10 basis points if our net margin drops. we're going to frantically look through every single receipt and P&L statement and expense statement to find out where that 0.1% increased and how I can immediately eliminate it so that I can fix it, because that's our livelihood. There's nothing to fall back on. There's no blue sky for independence. There's no established expectation of multiples, because as Alan Haig said to me at a table, the dealer principal is the value, right? And so if you're going to do a buy sell and they're gone, then there is nothing left, assuming that there's no brand and all that stuff, like push it, or develop
Yeah.
like technology or proprietary things.
Yeah,
Most of them
with
don't
a
have
franchise, you can buy and sell them pretty easily because there's the franchise, the brand. We use car
Right.
dealership or group. It's to your point, the dealer principal is so critical. It's almost like key man risk. Like you need that person to operate the business.
100%. I mean, and there's no market exclusivity, which you get with a franchise.
Correct. Yeah. Low barriers to entry. Someone can open up next door. Doesn't mean they'll be successful, but they can. No supply advantage necessarily. So, okay. Before we get into some more juicy stuff, numbers, economics, I'm curious about your profits. I do want to just tell the audience, please take a second. This episode has already had like tons of gems and I'm super excited about it. Take a second, tweet at me. Let me know what you think so far, because, the stuff you're sharing, it's truly how to operate this business. Like you said, there's a reason you guys have been in business for 30 plus years, because you're doing it right. On that note, let's keep going. So what's your net margin? You said you're doing about 250 million a year in sales. What's your net margin on that?
Net margin was at our best 5.5%. That's 2019 numbers. That net margin has dropped to, I'll be honest, almost zero at this point. And that's because our expectations for this year is to basically get through it. And then we will slowly grow that back up.
I didn't expect to hear that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
We just want to stay in some version of profitability to keep our lenders happy, to keep our floor plan happy. And we're doing that by cutting costs and doing everything we need to, but our volume has continued to decline. And that's not unique. I think that's generally the market trend right now.
So that's really big. I didn't expect that, to be honest. So let's just start. So you said typically, let's just say 5%. So 5% on 250, like 12.5 million, typically what you're netting a year.
Correct.
Now you're saying that, what is causing such a big swing? Is it volume and your fixed expenses are staying the same? What's happening this year that you're going, such a big swing to the low end?
Yeah, it's a combination of both. I mean, so volumes dropped. I mean, we were down about 30% in volume, but our gross profit had increased per unit slightly to combat that. So we did all right in 21. 22, the volume has continued to decline and gross profit has stayed relatively stable. And that's just the expectation. I don't think it sounds dramatic, but it's also the expectation. You look at all of the versions that we can see on public groups, it's about the same story. Because customer sentiment is still really low. I mean, it's been climbing this month, and I'm hoping that it continues to climb now that the default lows are behind us. But I don't have expectations of them cutting rates this year, which I think is the last kind of shoe to drop on customer sentiment getting back to somewhat of a normal level. So I think that there's still a story out there that is not totally untrue, that it's maybe the worst time in history to buy a used car, right? I mean, once CNN talks about the car market, you're like, wow, that's not good. That's not good for us. And that's been the case. So customers, I would say that the way I've explained it to my staff that we're talking about our expectations is we're in a need-only business right now, right? So I'm saying like customers are coming in the door are in need of a car. There's no want out there. There's no one saying like, this is the time where I'm just going to upgrade my car because I want something nicer. That is not going to happen in 2023. And I don't think it should. Now the argument for that long-term means that there's a tremendous amount of pent-up demand that will be coming down the pipe and a lot of collateral out there that will be traded in at that point. But I think that that's really the story of it. And you couple that with what you've been covering very heavily, which is tightening of lending. That means the same customers coming in that would have come in 2 years ago are not getting approved for a loan today, or they're getting approved for a loan with an incredibly high fee or a really high requirement for down payment.
Are you expecting to break even this year, or
yes?
So you're just flat out expecting that you're going to either break even, be a little negative, a little positive. That's pretty much it. Wow,
that's our plan. That was our when we exited 22. That was our plan for this year.
I do think that it's clearly, you've been in the business for a long time, right? And the reality is there have been some really good years for the business. And so, you have to isolate, 1 year. So again, I didn't expect you to say break even, but I do think, it's important to look on a longer time horizon. I'm sure the
Right.
last 5 years have been great.
Oh, been phenomenal. We actually had stacked 6 years of exact 10% growth year over year for both volume and net profit. And that was the expectation. And frankly, like you said before about save a buck to earn a buck kind of mentality of a dealership, I mean, we have GM meetings and manager meetings once a month. We bring everyone in from every store. We have meetings, we do lunch and breakfast and stuff. And I mean, I'm telling you, for the last 3 years, it's been, don't overextend yourself. There's something coming. There's a recession coming. That's just my father being my father. But that's the same thing applies to the business. We've been taking those profits and stashing them and investing them and putting them in, real estate, buying all of our dealerships so that we're not over leveraged, like
Smart.
making all these smart moves to be in a position where when we need access to capital, we'll have it. Now, I'm not saying that by any stretch of the imagination that the prediction was that we would have a global pandemic followed by, a massive inventory shortage, which would then be, followed by lending tightening. But we were somewhat prepared with massive cash reserves to handle this kind of instability in the market
Yeah.
because we had an expectation of a recession. I mean, the cycle was longer than normal, but it was going to happen. It's going to happen.
What, uh, what's your gross profit per unit?
Right now, it's a little over $5,000.
And then how much is that on the actual car versus the warranty?
It's about half and half.
Got it. Which doesn't surprise me. Again, for an independent focusing on used cars and, near and subprime market, that sounds about right. That's
Okay.
still, but that is definitely on the higher end, which is nice.
Yeah, it's healthy.
Explain to me now, what's your customer acquisition cost?
Over $600 right now, which is insane.
Got it. That's insane to you.
Yeah,
Why? What are you expecting?
300. The 300 is normal for us.
Got it.
Well, actually,
Tell us about.
was that lower than you thought?
No, I think that 600 is right in market. I think that's,
Okay.
I think NADA puts out the numbers. They're typically 5 to 600, to acquire a customer. And I think that, 300 is definitely on the lower end. The better months, I could almost bet you that on your best months, you're closer to 300.
Right.
But I want to talk about your marketing. This is something
Sure.
that I mentioned it earlier in the conversation. Give us a high level overview of what has been the marketing strategy for Easterns. Again, no barriers to entry really in the used car market. Anyone could do it, but you guys have done something very unique and creative. Can you just tell us about that? How did you get started? Give us
Sure.
the overview of what it is. And yeah,
Yeah. Well, first off, I appreciate it as always. But yeah, so I think a long time ago, my father, whether he knew it or not at the time, was a brand marketer. And he had been building a brand in the market. So, I picked the ball up where he kind of got it to a certain point and continued that effort. But, Easterns is a known brand in DC and Baltimore. And we've done that through, a ton of different ways. But we were early on television, early on radio, and I've always believed in the idea of building, a difference between the Easterns name and, other independent dealerships name. And we did that through a couple of interesting ways. The first big thing was our jingle, which is really what we're famous or infamous, depending on who you talk to, for.
wait,
And
wait,
fun
one
fact
second.
about that.
Harley, can you please play the jingle? People have to hear this jingle. This thing is so freaking catchy. Like I can't get it out of my head. So let's play it.
Honda, Chevy, Beamers, and minivans, over 600 cars, trucks, SUVs. Are you listening, man? Let Eastern Motors put you in a car today. Let Eastern Motors finance it all the way.
All right, the jingle just played. We can get back to it. I hope you enjoyed that. Let's keep going.
Yeah, so we did that with buying heavy on radio. And I'm telling you, there was a period of 5 to 10 years where you were not driving in a car. And this is, mind you, by the way, people still listen to the radio, where you would not hear that jingle. And to the point where if you wore an Eastern shirt in public, someone was going to start shouting it at you. It was lightning in a bottle. Fun fact, it's actually in the expansion pack for DC for Cards Against Humanity, which I think is amazing. It just became a DC thing. If you were from DC, you're from the DMV, You're from Baltimore, you know the Easterns jingle. That was like one of those tests. Like you say at Eastern Motors, and someone say, where your job's your credit. Like that was like almost like a gatekeeping test. And that was on radio for a long time, did super well. And then it really grew when we started our relationship with different, football players. And we've had basketball players as well through the years, but different sports personalities, which, anyone who's listening, who's, if you're thinking of kind of almost a stereotypical car dealership, they probably have a sports figure. But I think we really set ourselves apart by being really picky with who we put in our commercials. And we kind of joke that if you didn't make a Pro Bowl, you're not going to be in a commercial. And we've held true to that. We've held true to that. So it actually
Who are
started
some
with
of the? Yeah, I was gonna say, who are some of the athletes and celebrities?
over the years, we've had over 30 or 40 different people doing it. It started with LeVar Arrington and that kind of era of the Redskins and Washington team. And that had Clint Portis, Sean Taylor, Santa Moss, we had Carmelo Anthony before he got signed to the NBA. We had Ray Lewis. We had John Witherspoon. We had, Alan Pollock. I mean, it was a tremendous list of people that we've had in our commercials. And we've done it, I think, in a car dealership way. Like we've, been very honest and saying, hey, I'm not going to pay you the most, but we've got a trusted brand. We've got a long time doing this. And I'm going to make it really easy for you. It's a, 1 hour or 2 hour annual commitment. And this is what I'll give you in return. I'm not going to make you come to the dealership on a Saturday and sign autographs, all that kind of stuff that I think makes things real messy. And it's worked really well for us to the point at which every draft, my inbox and phone call, I get a lot of calls, a lot of different players, which is great. I feel like we've done that well in the same way that we kind of treat our customers. I consider them a stakeholder. But that even got more complicated and better in a lot of ways because we actually ended up partnering with the Washington Commanders. So we're technically the official car dealership of the Washington Commanders, and their executive staff and coaching staff all drive our vehicles in exchange for marketing assets, which is kind of insane.
Yeah.
That's one part of it. So the brand. So we've always said that brand wins us ties. So same way I mentioned CarMax versus a regular dealership giving an offer. We invest so much in that because we think our brand dictates, one, a premium, which helps us with gross profit. But two, if we have similar collateral to somebody else, they're going to choose us because we're a known entity, a known brand, something they're familiar with. So we kind of constantly beat that drum in the market. We think it's not sunk cost. It's something that you have to keep doing. That being said, we actually cut back on it a lot to save cost. And then we saw it slowly wither away. Like you could actually see it in our GA. When you're watching our web traffic, you can see the organic start to slowly slither away, which is the only kind of KPI
from the brand
you can
marketing.
measure. From brand marketing, correct. And then so our other marketing, we do a ton of other, digital stuff that's, we could bore your audience for probably 2 hours on that kind of stuff, but it's all like behavioral targeted and finding people in market, presenting them with brand and presenting them with vehicles they're looking for and things like that. But I mean, it's a decent marketing budget. We'll spend, $5 to $6 million a year. You spread that across 2 DMAs and 8 retail locations. It actually works out to be, still a pretty healthy budget, but not one that's completely outrageous. But again, all that's managed here at corporate. So there's no GM making these random decisions or getting pitched. It's just me and my marketing team here, and we run all that in-house, and it's a blast. I'm actually in the process of scheduling our next commercial shoot with Terry McLaurin in 2 weeks. So we'll do our next Commander shoot soon.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's a blast. I mean, that's the funnest. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I believe me. I love the marketing side of this business, clearly. But you mentioned again, decentralization. Another question on that. Earlier in the conversation, you mentioned that you used to have like 16 or 18 locations. You've downsized that. Why did you even expand to 16, 18 locations? And then walk me through the thinking of downsizing that back down while having volume remain the same. Walk me through that.
So we had 17 locations. All that rapid expansion happened prior to the crisis of 2008. And we actually had a franchise point at that period of time. So we haven't been a pure independent our entire career. We can come back to that. But the reason was we actually were able to buy a competitor. One of those competition people I mentioned earlier in our conversation that didn't make it. They had copied our model and they had ready stores that were turnkey.
Who'd you buy?
There's a company called Southerns. They weren't subtle about it. Yeah, it's different than Southern. There actually is another group called Southern Automotive. They're a really good operator that's in the southern area of Virginia and North Carolina, but different operators. But it was, it was a complicated, messy thing. It was, in and out of court, ended up just letting it go. And actually, I was talking to my dad about the story last night. And he even said to his attorney, he's like, look, you met the guy who was running that group at the time. He had oil money. And he's like, you know what? Let's just settle this case, move on, give them their costs. I don't want to deal with this. I'm going to let the street decide. Those are the words he said. So we let the consumers decide. And within a year, they ended up closing their doors, and we bought all their points. So we grew real quick. And there's actually we learned a valuable lesson about growth through that period of time. But what we found, aside from that, which I'll come back to, was that our customers weren't being served better. Because of all the investment we had made in brand, we started understanding that I didn't need regional points. I didn't need, 10 satellite lots that had 50 or 60 cars parked on them. I have enough of a brand where they'll drive past, a couple dealerships to get to the big Easterns that parks 200 or 300 cars. And so now our minimum parking for a dealership acquisition is 200 spots. And really our goal is 400 plus. And that's our business model now. It's built on super centers that can be supported from the hub, as opposed to a ton of different satellite lots, because, the fixed costs and staffing, all that stuff gets way more complicated when you're running more points than one more efficient point. So
Well said.
yeah, it's
and agreed.
Yeah.
The more you can show on one lot, why disperse the customers to, various locations if your brand can
Right.
bring them to the same place?
Yeah. And it's also enabled us to be more efficient on one of our value propositions, which is when you shop at Easterns, you're not buying from one point, you're buying from a brand. So that, the first thing a customer says, a customer advisor and product specialist, or a CAPS, as we call them for short, it's a salesperson, says to a customer is, besides their name and how are you, is just so you know, I've got 200 cars here, but you've got 1,000 cars to choose from, and I can have any of them transfer here within 30 minutes. It's part of our BDC language. It's part of all that stuff. And we will move cars from one point to another based on customer convenience with no deposit. Which, our close friend, John Harabedian, thinks I'm absolutely nuts for doing that, by the way. But I've sent him the data and I've proven that it works, but he still doesn't believe it. But it's funny, like the idea of it just, it makes sense, because in the used space specifically, and not to be a little, dramatic, but every car's a snowflake, right? There's only one of that silver Nissan Versa with that many miles on it with, that specific, tear on the back corner, right? There's only one of every one of them. So customers, we encourage them to dislike a vehicle based on something small, because I think that's what matters more. Because frankly, modern cars are all built super well. They're super reliable. There isn't some secret that I'm sure you will get as being in the industry all the time. It's like, well, which are the good ones? I'm like, they're all good. All of them will last 250,000 miles if you treat them right.
If you treat them right.
What really, if you treat them right. But what really matters is, do you think the seats are comfortable? Do you like the way the infotainment is laid out? I mean, is the trunk big enough for what you're going to use it for? Do you have car seats? For your previous guest, the car seats fit in the back seat. Are you planning on having another kid? These are things that our sales staff are trained to talk about with customers, because we don't want to be a commodity seller, right? We want to be a brand that offers options that fit that person's lifestyle. And so everything's built around that concept. The vehicle doesn't matter. And even in our prep notes, you would ask, like, what's our best selling car? Frankly, I mean, I actually don't know, and I don't care, because whatever it is today, it'll be a different car tomorrow. It's going to be a different car in a week. And probably the ones that we're going to sell the most of are the ones that we got the best deal for at auction.
It's the best. It's the most financeable car. That's the
exactly. Secret. Yeah. If this is an independent thing, every GM we ask, what kind of cars do you want in your lot? Left a book. I don't care. I mean, just for you listeners,
cars that you have equity in and you can actually sell with a low down payment and make money. Yes.
The ones that at retail are lower, have a less than 100% LTV. Yeah, those are sellable cars.
100%.
The car that's sitting there at 110% LTV at sticker is not going to be an easy car.
What's next for the group, Joel? Like, are you guys expanding right now? Where are you looking to expand? What's the deal?
Yeah. So, it's funny. You'd ask, like, what's my sentiment about the business overall? And it's positive, even though I'm talking about not having a great year. And proof's in the pudding. We're looking at adding at least one more point this year, potentially more in other markets. So we believe that our Baltimore market's underserved. So we've got some points that we're looking at there. We're really close on that.
Wait, why do you believe that? What data do you look at? Like, why do you think it's underserved?
Well, So Baltimore is our busiest store. We have one, and I'll call it 1.5 store. So, DC, just a little bit of our area. DC is a huge DMA that's comprised of I guess 2 states and 1 territory. By the way, I'm pro DC statehood, if that matters, but that's a different podcast. But that market is huge. It's got 8.5 million people in it. It's served, across multiple states, and we want to have more stores in there, but we're landlocked in a lot of ways. So Baltimore is a much smaller market. It's got 2.5 million people in it. We have 1 store that's in the Baltimore, the actual Baltimore County inside the Beltway. It's our best performing store by far, but not even close.
Wow.
And we think that, and honestly, a problem with the store is it's too busy at times. We can't have enough salespeople to fit into the showroom. So that's twice where we've been looking for the right property to find, and we finally found one that we think is perfect. And honestly, another thing is with the recent woes of Echo Park, they have a location there that's actually turnkey that might end up shifting our attention from the property we had looking at to that property, because again, it's built to be an independent shop.
You're talking about the old Carbiz location?
Yeah, Ethan's old
I know
store.
what
Yeah.
you're talking about.
Yeah,
I know
yeah.
what you're talking
It's
about.
good piece of property.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's that we want to keep adding that, because again, our business model, even if we're not doing well, if I add a spoke to this hub, my fixed and variable costs on my hub stay the same. And if it contributes anything to the middle, it has an exponential return at the bottom of net profit. Because the staffing requirements and costs of that store are really low.
Yeah, it's all
And so
leverage. Makes total sense.
Right. And we're firm believers in buying the dip. Right now, what keeps me up at night.
Buying the dip. I didn't think I would hear it on this podcast, but I love it. Buying the dip.
It's the opportunity cost of not expanding at this point is massive. So we're going to look for it. And honestly, I'm looking at opening a franchise point pretty soon. There's some opportunities that are presented to us.
That's a change of sentiment.
That could work. I said all that stuff about franchise. It doesn't mean that there's not availability there and diversification for the brand.
Yeah.
And a little, kind of behind the scenes stuff for, your non-automotive listeners is independents at times can be borderline second-class citizens in the automotive space, where they have a blanket policy of we do not sign independents, right?
You're talking
you'll
about,
know that
you're referring to lending partners. Is that right?
lending partners, floor plan relationships, potentially, even real estate.
Correct. Many
Many
industry partners are very tough on independents. And,
100%.
It's really derived from just statistics, because yes, there are a lot of, independents that are not great, but there's also a lot of independents that are great. And I've also been vocal about this, that, it's sort of unfair. It's a reality though, right? I've tweeted about lenders that just cut off every single independent, no matter what.
Yeah.
Even if you've been with them for 30 years. So it's, I agree with you. It definitely feels that way at times.
Yeah, literally just happened to us. Regional was one of our longest standing and best partners, which, part of the truest, cut off there. And yeah, it is what it is. It's something that we have to deal with in this market. And a lot of our relationships are long enough and have been built on such positive performing portfolios that we might be their only independent in the nation that they accept. They're one of their onlys, right? But the problem is, at some point on paper, someone up top might say, hey, why are we making an exception for this group? And so there is potentially some value for that. In our past, that gate has been open for us, so we haven't been concerned with it. But in an uncertain economic climate, one of the first people that get cut are independents. So
100%.
there's opportunity there, and there's potentially a short-term opportunity in gaining access to some up funnel, buying channels. But right now, most of those are open to us too. That's just the funnels are empty for everyone. It doesn't really matter if you're independent or new. But either way, it's an opportunity, and we might do it. And I think it'll work out well for us. There's no doubt that I think we'd be successful at it. We were in the past. I'd mentioned that we had a Hyundai franchise, and we just ran it like a used car store. We took it from, bottom of the market to second. We increased its service revenue by 300% within a year. And we just ran it like a used car dealership and, treated customers well. And lo and behold, it worked out. It's kind of funny. Sometimes it's the simplest answer is the best. Why don't you just treat them well and be transparent? And you'd be surprised how much that works out. But yeah.
What does Easterns looks like in 10 years? What's changed?
I think hopefully we're able to continue to expand other markets. We're looking at growing more into the Northeast and potentially in the South. Frankly, some of our decisions that changed because of the Echo Park announcement, there's now suddenly a bunch of purpose-built independent stores that are the right size, right fit, right market for us, that we might kind of pivot some of our attention to. But that's like a really, recent and volatile thing right now. But again, it's the hub and spoke model is our core. And something we haven't really talked about is, how you leverage modern retailing or digital retailing or whatever, the term will be by the time this is put out for what used to be called digital retailing, leveraging that to increase sales per salesperson and using that to maximize a hybrid model of in-store and online retail, I think is the future of the car business. I think that there is a huge area of misunderstanding for online only that it's going to be incredibly difficult to make that be truly profitable. You can see that in Carvana's numbers, and their road to profitability is still really far away. And I believe that in today's world, not even talking about the car business, the real way to market is online first, brick and mortar second, because you're going to hit a certain point where the adoption curve for online is just going to get capped. And I don't think that's necessarily going to go away. I don't think even as Gen Z and whatever the next generation, like there's still going to be a point at which they're going to want to test drive this car. And we believe that having those support points will also enable you to do more online retail. So you take a company like one of my favorite companies is Allbirds, right? I buy their shoes religiously. I think they're almost basically a marketing company. They were online only, and lo and behold, now they're open to retail points. They could Casper Mattress, Peloton, any of the big brands that have grown dramatically over the last few years. They hit a point at which they looked at their spreadsheets and growth and pro formas and said, if we want to get more customers, we need them to touch the product. We need them to feel the product. We need to see it in person. And that's to me, that's the future. Is same way that we treat prime customers or subprime customers like prime customers, we want to do the same thing with our online and in-store customers. And so we actually trademark the term any car, any way for everyone. And that's meant to encompass a few different things. One, any car, we sell cars from, well, not right now, 10,000, maybe 20,000 to 150,000. We sell any way. That means you can do none of the deal online or 100% of the deal online and have it show up at your house. And right now, about 30% of my transactions are happening from or actually hung paper from my sales center that are picked up in store. Those NPS scores are through the roof. They're 30-minute transactions. Customers love it.
Explain that for a second. How are 30% of your transactions are what?
Are actually the financing, product sales, the car selection is happening from my BDC department, and it's set up as a deal for the store to print.
So it's happening
the customer remotely, 100% remotely.
Got
Credit
it.
pull, stip collection, contract printing, everything's happening remotely. Customer just physically goes to the store to pick up. They e-sign their contracts, and they're happy.
Yeah, so you're like 30% of your sales, you're pretty much like a delivery center.
Yeah, and that's why we call our stores delivery centers. So that's our anticipated growth. Like
what are you using? What are you using to power your online sales? Like what software are you using for that?
We use Roadster. We were actually we invested in Roadster really early on. So, and yeah, we love that software. We think it's a perfect fit for how we use it.
Great.
But yeah, that's the growth. So we want to keep adding points because it increases our reach for delivery as well as customers being in those markets. And it allows us to park more cars. Used cars you have to sell. And right now you can't have them, so we're not selling as many, but that's a temporary market condition that will be alleviated. And so we're going to continue to keep our foot down on the gas and grow, because it's just going to make us that much more profitable. And I actually mentioned this a little earlier in the podcast about one of the things we learned when we had 17 stores is part of that growth model is slow, planned, sustained growth. Because what we found when we grew too fast was we lost all of our culture. There was no ownership at the store level. There was no concept of connection to, my father at the time and, my father and me and our COO, Tim, and our CSO, Ali. Like, they need to know them. I want to know their kids' names. Like, that's important to me. And that is a core identity of who we are. And I need them to have my cell phone. And if he's having trouble logging the Podium, he can text me at 8 o'clock. And that happens. And I'm okay with that. That's encouraged. And you can't, if I'm opening, a store a year, like some VC might demand, or even a buy sell for another larger group that's really aggressive for growth, they say, I want a store open every 6 months. I can't do that. I just can't. I can't physically have enough culture built into that store. And so our goal is to continue to grow that. In 2019, we planted our flag and we said we wanted 25 by 25, 25,000 cars sold by 2025. Then COVID happened. So that's not going to happen. I feel pretty confident in that. I think 20 by 25, if we can capitalize some of these deals, is within reach, but even then it still might not be possible. But let's say 25 by 30. I think that's totally reasonable. 25,000 used cars retailed. That's doable. I mean, yeah, it's double what we were doing at our growth. But I think if we leverage our online tools better, we have more points, we park more cars, it's super doable for us.
My friend, this was a used car masterclass. I think people will absolutely love it. This was really great.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much, man. Loved it. And we'll talk soon.
Yeah, pleasure as always, sir.
Thank you. All right. Hope you enjoyed that episode. Please give the podcast a rating, consider subscribing to the show, and check the show notes for links to what we talked about. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you guys next time.